Sammy Smith has reportedly had conversations with Trackhouse Racing for 2024. Noah Gragson has been reinstated by NASCAR, and NASCAR re-adds stage cautions at road courses for the Charlotte Roval. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to your video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We'll go ahead by starting to talk about Mountain Dew, as it was announced yesterday that Mountain Dew is going to sponsor Justin Haley this weekend at Bristol. This will be the first time that Mountain Dew will be sponsoring a NASCAR Cup Series car since 2020, when they sponsored Chase Elliott and when they left and PepsiCo left altogether. It's really awesome to see a company like Mountain Dew back in the sport. I really hope they come and sponsor more cars down the road. I think this paint scheme is absolutely incredible. Colley's had a lot of awesome schemes this year in 2023. This is no exception, and nonetheless, really glad to see that Mountain Dew is back in NASCAR. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about DHL. As it was officially confirmed by Marshall Pruett and other motorsports reporters that DHL will not return to Andretti Autosport in 2024. I believe DHL had been part of Andretti Autosport since either 2010 or 2011, and they had sponsored Ryan Hunter-Reay for all of his wins when he drove at Andretti Autosport, and also, of course, sponsored him when he won the 2014 Indy 500, and I believe also when he won the IndyCar Championship as well in 2012. DHL's had a long-term partnership. It's a shame they're not going to be back with Andretti Autosport. They've obviously, I think, liked working with Romain Grosjean. We're not sure Romain Grosjean is going to IndyCar in 2024. But nonetheless, it's disappointing to see that they are not going to be coming back to Andretti Autosport. But it isn't a shock and surprise me that they're not returning. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Rocket League. Now, there's a new NASCAR DLC on Rocket League that is coming later today. This is going to include that number 452311 racing car. The 78 Live Fast Motorsports car is also going to be there. I believe the 42 or 43 Legacy Motor Club car is going to be there. The 24 Hendrick car, William Byron drives, and of course, a lot of other really awesome cars coming into Rocket League. It's really awesome to see that Rocket League is continuing to have a partnership with NASCAR. They're going after the younger demographic, which I think is the goal of NASCAR long term, is they want to go for that demographics between ages of 18 and 49. That's goal for NASCAR long term. So I think this is a really great decision overall that they've gone ahead and done this, and glad to see that there's going to be more NASCAR DLC on Rocket League. I think this is huge for the sport. I think this is massive, and glad to see that they are going to be some more cars from Rocket League going to be there. Really exciting stuff. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about BJ McLeod. As it was announced this morning, along with Patrick Emerling, that BJ McLeod will drive for Emerling Gase Motorsports this weekend at Bristol. BJ McLeod, of course, currently owns Live Fast Motorsports and also owns BJ McLeod Motorsports as well. Hasn't really ran for a lot of other different teams in the last years, because he's obviously either driven for BJ McLeod Motorsports' own organization or Live Fast Motorsports. But it's really cool to see that BJ is going to drive for Emerling Gase Motorsports. BJ, very experienced here at Bristol. I think BJ will have a decent run, honestly, though I'm not sure how he's going to do, considering Emerling Gase Motorsports has struggled throughout the year. I think to bring him in for owners' points' sake. So nonetheless, really glad to see that BJ is going to run, and hopefully he can do a really good job at Emerling Gase Motorsports. I'm not sure how he's going to do, but I am very happy to see that he will be driving for Emerling Gase Motorsports this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Sage Karam. As it was announced yesterday that Sage Karam will drive the 66 for MBM Motorsports in a couple weeks at Texas Motor Speedway. Sage Karam was making a lot of starts here in 2023 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, of course, for Alpha Prime Racing in many of those starts. Ran a one-off start for Sam Hunt Racing at Road America, where he had a chance to win that race up front, competing for that victory through the whole entire event. And then, of course, made a couple of select starts with MBM Motorsports as well. This is a really good opportunity for Sage Karam. Obviously, MBM Motorsports is not the fastest team overall, but if there's anyone that can take that equipment up front, it is definitely Sage Karam. And I will say, MBM Motorsports, they've kind of scaled back their program, but they've been running a lot faster and a lot more closer to the front on a consistent basis. They've been showing decent speed in qualifying, and they've been finishing the top 30 a lot more consistently. So maybe, just maybe long term, MBM Motorsports is going to become a good team, which would be really good for the sport if we could have another competitive team. So hopefully we'll see what happens in regards to how Sage is going to do, but I'm glad to see that Sage is going to have the opportunity to drive with the team once again. Hopefully he can make the best of it and have a great finish with the team. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Danny Bone. as it was officially announced yesterday that Danny Bohn will drive the 44 for Nice Motorsports this weekend at Bristol. Danny Bohn has made select starts, I think, in the Truck Series, maybe this year. Maybe this is his first start, not entirely sure. But Danny Bohn has made a lot of starts in the Truck Series before. Obviously, comes from the Modified Tour, and it's ran really good in the Modified Tour as well. This is a decent truck for him. Obviously, this truck, I believe, does have to qualify its wins. I don't think it has enough owners' points to make the main event and the show. So hopefully Danny Bohn can do good enough to get this truck into the field. This truck has struggled at times, but it also has ran good at times. So hopefully he can make the best of it and have a strong run with Nice Motorsports this weekend at Bristol, which of course is tomorrow night. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about 3F Racing. As officially announced by Ryan Vargas and 3F Racing, that 3F Racing is going to make their NASCAR Euro Series debut later this month, about a week from now, and Ryan Vargas is going to be the driver of 3F Racing. For those of you who don't know, Ryan Vargas has been working with 3F Racing all year. It was announced back, I think, in June or July that he become basically the driver development guy for their team and became the reserve driver for their Cup Series program when they inevitably do go up to the Cup Series. They do have long-term preparation and plans. They do want to go Cup Series racing long-term. And they obviously have been winning the races here in 2023. And I really do hope they get to race at some point at the end of the year in Cup, even though it sounds like that's not going to happen this year because we're getting really close to the end of the year. But I would think in 2024, it's more than likely that they are going to go ahead and race. That being said, I'm very happy about this. I'm glad to see if 3F Racing is going to actually be showing up to the racetrack in the NASCAR Euro Series. And it's really good experience for Ryan Vargas because I also believe that Ryan Vargas is going to run at Talladega later that week as well, or close to that time. So I think that's also something that's really, really exciting is the fact you're going to get Ryan Vargas to run not just in the Euro Series, but also race in the Truck Series race at Talladega. So I think that's something that's really exciting and really awesome. So nonetheless, really glad to see if 3F Racing is finally going to be making their debut and glad to still be racing in the NASCAR Euro Series. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Alex Palou. Now, it was reported by Nathan Brown from the Indy Star that there's been a lot of talk. We've already kind of talked about the lawsuits quite a bit on this channel. Well, according to Nathan Brown, that the complaint in a McLaren F1 commercial court case against Alex Palou in the UK claims he has signed a 3-year deal with McLaren and Arrow McLaren. And, of course, that was during his arbitration case. Remember, last year, Alex Palou had signed a contract with Arrow McLaren and McLaren F1 because he had been hoping to go to Formula 1 maybe in 2024. However, there's no Formula 1 seats that are currently available that are really, really competitive. And if there wasn't a competitive seat, Alex Palou was not going to go. So he broke that contract. He broke his contract with the Monaco team that he had been working with, the Monaco agency, and is once again working with Roger Gasakawa, who is brought back in this agency that he's currently working with, which is one of the reasons why there's this case that is going on as we speak. Now, I do not expect that McLaren is going to force Alex Palou to drive one of their cars for 2024, considering the fact that they already have 3 cars going to 2024 for their IndyCar program. They've got Dave Malukas joining the team this year. You've got Pat O'Ward, and then, of course, you've got Alexander Rossi, who's driving the team once again in 2024. I do think that this is going to get eventually settled. I think that they wanted to get this championship out of the way. Alex Palou is having a great year in Chip Ganassi, and if you're having had as good a year as Palou had, where he scored 5 wins and won the championship a week early, why would you leave Chip Ganassi racing? I think this will get settled, though. I think things will get figured out, and I don't think this will be a story long-term down the road. I think this gets figured out in the not-so-distant future, and I think that this thing will be saluted. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about some penalties. Now, yesterday there were a couple of pretty big penalties that were announced. First, Jeff Stankiewicz, who was the crew chief, who is the crew chief for Sheldon Creed, has been suspended for this week's race at Bristol because they had 2 missing lug nuts. If you have 2 missing lug nuts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, a crew chief receives a 1-race suspension. And it was also announced that the 02 truck for Young's Motorsports and the number 9 truck for CR7 Motorsports have been handed L1 penalties for triangular filler panel violations. That is a 10-point penalty for both of those organizations. Obviously not a shock with those penalties, some pretty minor penalties for some of those teams. Yes, 10 points could be a huge difference for the 02 and the 19, but really isn't the biggest deal in the world for those teams. Obviously, it's a pretty big deal for James Stankiewicz. Isn't going to be there as a crew chief for one week because we've seen how well him and Sheldon Creed have worked together. While they haven't won a race this year in 2023, they certainly have been pretty strong and pretty competitive throughout this year. So it is disappointing that they're not going to be working together this week, but again, you have to follow the rules, and if you have 2 missing lug nuts, you're going to get suspended. So it is what it is overall, and it's not surprising and shocking that these penalties have been handed out. But again, Jeff Stankiewicz has been suspended for the next week, and it isn't shocking or surprising. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. As is first reported by TobyChristie.com and Joseph Wrigley, and then inevitably by everybody, that Spire Motorsports will not field the number 77 Xfinity Series car this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. In addition, it was also announced that they are not sure if they will run any more Xfinity Series races in 2023. Now, why are they not racing this weekend at Bristol? Well, a huge reason is because Carson Hocevar, who was supposed to drive the number 77 car, Carson Hocevar is driving the number 42 for Legacy Motor Club this weekend. Obviously, he's in for Noah Gragson, we'll talk about here later in this episode. But they don't need Carson Hocevar in the 77 car anymore because he's getting Cup Series experience. And it's obviously no secret that it sounds more than likely at this part that Carson Hocevar will be full-time in the Cup Series in 2024. Spire Motorsports had a lot of competitive success, and also you do have to remember another thing is that Dale Jr. is returning to the Xfinity Series this weekend as well. And they would have had to field 6 cars because remember, Spire Motorsports gets their equipment from Junior Motorsports. So that's a huge reason why they are not going to be showing up this weekend. I think it's not a bad decision overall. Now, I don't think that they're going to be running any more races, to be honest with you. I think that they're going to focusing on their Cup program and even their truck program because we've seen them run a lot more truck races as well. So that's one thing to keep an eye on and focus, but I'm not surprised in shock that they aren't running. I do think there's a chance of possibly next year they are going to run full-time. They've ran select starts this year. Again, they're going to have to make more cars next year if they do run full-time. But I would imagine Spire Motorsports does want to run the full Xfinity Series season. It sounds like they want to run the full-time in trucks in 2024. And Raj Kroof might get an opportunity to drive that truck next year. But it's one thing to keep an eye on for sure. But it's not surprising and shocking also that they are not running the Xfinity Series race at Bristol. Not a major shock and major surprise. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kentucky Speedway. As Kentucky Speedway on Monday shockingly put out a tweet on Twitter announcing that they're going to be having the Rusty Wallace racing experience at the racetrack on September 23rd. This will be the first time that Kentucky Speedway has tweeted in 3 years. The last time they tweeted was in 2020 when they were still on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule and right after Cole Custer had taken the victory. So it's been a very long time since Kentucky Speedway had tweeted. Now, a lot of people do believe there's a chance of possibility that people do want Kentucky Speedway to be brought back onto the NASCAR Cup Series schedule because a lot of people believe that the racing in Kentucky could be really, really good. I hate to break it to you, but the racing at Kentucky Speedway, if it was ever to come back on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, would not be good. Right now, the way the track is laid out and how it's grooved out is not good at the moment. The racing would not be great. And before the repave, it was decent in 2015. We saw a pretty soft finish between Joey Logano and Kyle Busch. And Xfinity Series have put on some pretty good shows. But the track just is become a one-groove racetrack, very similar to Texas. They kind of did the repave a little similar to Texas, where they basically made the top more like shorter, and basically it became a one-groove racetrack where you could not pass. Again, I know it was basically a Gen 6 car where the racing was bad, but I don't think the racing would be good. I think it would be bad. I think it would be a struggle, and I really just hope that they do not bring this track back to the NASCAR Cup Series schedule or back to NASCAR in general. I understand why a lot of people do want it, believe me, but in my personal and honest opinion, I just don't think the racing will be as good. I do want a few more intermediates, and if we're going to add any more intermediate tracks to the NASCAR schedule, let's add Chicago in the schedule, and let's bring the Charlotte Oval back for the playoff race. And I think that would be really, really good overall if they were deciding to do that. That being said, I really hope that Kentucky does not return to the NASCAR schedule. Trust me, I know a lot of fans want to bring it back, but if you want my personal honest opinion, I hope that Kentucky Speedway never returns to the NASCAR Cup Series schedules. I don't think the racing is going to be good. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Derek Kraus. As it was announced yesterday that Derek Kraus will drive the 11 for Kaulig Racing for 3 more additional races in 2023. He'll be racing the Xfinity Series race on Friday night at Bristol, then a race in Homestead later in the year, and his final race will be at Phoenix Raceway. Derek Kraus has made quite a few starts in the 11 car or the 10 car before for Kaulig Racing, and honestly, he has been extremely impressive. He scored a couple top 10s here with the number 10 team. He hasn't scored a top 5 yet, but he's been close to maybe even getting a top 5 so far in 2023. I do believe that Derek Kraus is going to be a pretty big contender with the 11 team. He's a pretty good short track racer. We saw what he could do with Spire Motorsports in that number 17 where he had a potential to score a top 5. Again, that team is competitive, and he was doing really, really good with their organization. And while Call Racing has struggled at times throughout the year in 2023, I think Derek Kraus is a very solid and a very, very capable driver. So I'm very happy to see that he's going to be back with this team. I think that Derek Kraus will do overall a pretty good job with Call Racing in the 11 team for the next few weeks. I think he's going to be competitive. I think he's going to be really, really strong, and I think he'll have a chance to maybe get a top 5. I think he's pretty underrated, and I think there's a chance he'd be full-time with this team next year, as I think they really like working with him, and maybe we'll see him full-time with the team in 2023, I should say. Nonetheless, glad to see him back with Call Racing at least for the next 3 weeks. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Hill. Now, we obviously know at this point that Austin Hill is going to be returning to Rich Schultz Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024 as he signed a multi-year contract extension with Rich Schultz Racing. We all initially thought he had the Call Racing's Cup Series program for 2024, but then shockingly made the announcement that he was going to be returning to the 21 car. Now, Daniel Trotta from Series M NASCAR, who we talked about later today, she basically asked him how long is Austin Hill's contract in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Well, according to what Austin Hill said, he is going to run 2 more years in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, meaning he'll be in the number 21 car for 2024 and 2025. But there's a chance that possibly that he'll make select NASCAR Cup Series starts, whether that is with Beard Motorsports or with the 33 car for RCR that we see Broda Kosecki drive for. That is to be determined if he's going to ride in those rides. But I think this is a really good decision for Austin Hill. Obviously, there's not a lot of great Cup opportunities left available right now, and while I think Call Racing would have been a good opportunity for him to drive for, I simply think staying where you are is a good decision. But the thing that's going to be interesting is Austin Hill by the end of 2025, I believe, will be 31 years old, so he'll be a little bit of an older driver in the NASCAR Cup Series of rookie standards. Now, of course, back in the early 2000s, you were in your 30s, and we saw rookies in their young 30s, but now you're starting to see a lot younger drivers who are in their young 20s to mid-20s. So it'd be a very interesting move to him that he wants to stick around the next years in Xfinity. But you don't want to fix what is broken. He's having a great year in the Xfinity Series, won 4 races, and is someone who I think could win a championship this year in 2024. And I think he's 23, I should say. And I think he's going to have chances to win multiple championships. And going in the next year, you would have to imagine he's probably going to be the favorite to win that NASCAR Xfinity Series championship. Because like I said, we know that John Hunter Nemechek is moving up to the NASCAR Cup Series to drive for Legacy Motor Club in 2024. And then inevitably, I think John Hunter is going to get integrated into the Joe Gibbs Racing team. Whether that is in 2025 or 26 is to be determined. That being said, I do believe that Austin Hill is making a decent decision overall, and I think that he will continue to do great things with RCR, and I think he's going to win more races than he's already had this year. I wouldn't be surprised if Austin Hill goes on and wins 6-7 races next year in 2024, and maybe, if he wins a championship in 2023, he could potentially go back-to-back when it comes to championships in 2024. Nonetheless, very happy and glad to see that Austin Hill is returning to the team in the 2024 season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sammy Smith. Now, there's been a lot of conversation recently about Sammy Smith and his future. And Nathan Solomon, who currently works at the Podium Finish, had asked Sammy Smith about his 2024 plans. And he says he is still working on his 2024 plans and is not sure if he will be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing or not. There have been some rumors and chatter circulating over the last 2 weeks that Sammy Smith may not be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024 in the number 18 car. Now, if Sammy Smith does not return to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024, where could he end up driving? Well, there's been some chatter and rumors recently that Sammy Smith may head over and drive the 8 car for Junior Motorsports in 2024. Now, why would Sammy Smith go over to Junior Motorsports in 2024? Well, he would take over the 8 car. The 8 car is looking for sponsorship in funding. And what company is he sponsored by? Pilot Flying J. Pilot Flying J is a former sponsor of Junior Motorsports, and they had worked with Michael Annett. And if I'm not mistaken, Michael Annett is working with his agency, if I'm not mistaken, with Sammy Smith. So it would make a lot of sense for him to go over to Junior Motorsports. And he'd be a very, very young driver. Now, a lot of people probably disagree with the move, but you have to remember, Sammy Smith, and people will probably say that Sammy Smith has struggled with Joe Gibbs Racing this year. Yes, he hasn't had the greatest year with Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but you do have to remember that Sammy Smith is only 19 years old, and he had his first career win at the age of 19. And I do believe that at 18, I should say, and I think that Sammy Smith is only going to get better the more experience that he ends up getting. And I do believe that he will end up basically being somewhat of a contender and a threat for the championship next year if he goes over the 8 car and replaces someone who is pretty good. Now, he's not the only driver that's in the running for that 8 car. You have Jeff Earnhardt, who's rumored. Carson Osbar is a mention for that 8 car. I've seen people even mentioning Matt DiBenedetto, who's rumored for that 8 car as well. And even Roger Cruz has been mentioned as a driver as a possibility. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see who ends up in that 8 car next year. Now, if Sammy Smith does not end up going to the 8 car, ends up going to the 8 car next year in 2024, who takes over his car in the Xfinity Series? Well, there's a couple of potential possibilities. You have drivers like Trevor Bayne. Trevor Bayne wants to run full-time once again in 2024, is making select starts with Joe Gibbs Racing Xfinity Series team, and of course is running in the race on Friday. You've also got, of course, Ryan Truex, who wants to run full-time next year. And with John Nemechek moving up full-time to Cup Series, he might take the 20 car, but also might take the 18 car. And then you've got Matt DiBenedetto, who's a former Joe Gibbs Racing driver, who could drive for the team. And you've also got Corey Heim, who's heavily rumored he might want to move up to Xfinity in 2024. But I think that Sammy Smith, if he returns to Joe Gibbs Racing next year, I think that's also a good decision, because I think he's going to prove with JGR in 2024. It is going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to Sammy Smith's future. I think there's as much of a chance, though, that he does return to the team as he leaves the team in 2024. But I think there's a great chance and possibility that we are going to end up seeing him leave and move up to a different organization like Junior Motorsports in the 2024 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chase Elliott versus Kyle Larson. Now, over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of tension and drama in regards to both of these drivers. Let's go back to Sunday evening. At the end of the NASCAR Cup Series race, Chase Elliott, coming off pit road, had contact with Kyle Larson, where Kyle Larson was trying to avoid Brad Keselowski, and Kyle Larson accidentally and unintentionally swerved into Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott then swerved back into Kyle Larson, and Chase Elliott basically said it was a non-issue after the race, but he swerved back to Kyle Larson after and was really frustrated and upset. Danielle Trotta went on a series of NASCAR radio on Monday, and she got a lot of attack from people, and a lot of Chase Elliott fans went after her because she called out Chase Elliott quite a bit and said that, and kind of said something at the time I agree with, and said that basically she said that Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson do not like each other. Well, Chase Elliott actually went on Sirius NASCAR radio yesterday and was on with Dave Mooney and responded to her claims and says that he takes responsibility for running into Kyle Larson. He said they both talked after race. He said he didn't have the full big picture of what had happened, and says he and Kyle Larson do get along very, very well, and they basically do like working together very, very well. Obviously, over the last few years, Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott have had some tension. You go back to last year, what happened between both those drivers. You go back to what happened at Auto Club, where Chase Elliott got ran into by Kyle Larson, and Kyle Larson was definitely responsible for that. Then you go to Watkins Glen later in the year, where Kyle Larson ran Chase Elliott wide and up the racetrack, and I blame Kyle Larson a little bit for that as well, but he's going for the win. He overshot the corner. But then you go back to this year, some of the instances that Chase Elliott's had, obviously right and Denny Hamlin down the straightaway in the Coke 600, where he got suspended, and then of course this situation where Chase Elliott was clearly in the wrong for the situation. But both drivers, I think, do actually get along, despite the fact that, they can say whatever they want. I think that both Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson do get along very, very well. And I do think that this is something that they probably addressed already, and I think this is probably a non-issue at this point. And look what they've all done. And if they're going to work together very, very well, and you're going to have friendly competition. Both drivers had a lot of success. Both have won championships, both Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson. Both have won a lot of races. Larson, since coming over, has won 16 races, and has, of course, won the Coke 600 and Southern 500. Chase Elliott's won 7 races since Kyle Larson came over. He hasn't won this year, of course, but I think he's going to come back and be a championship threat next year in 2024. And then, of course, you have the emergence of William Byron, who's won 8 or 9 races in the last few years and has become a championship contender and has emerged. And the worst driver team, Alex Bowman, is still a very solid driver. And your worst driver is Alex Bowman. Your team's in very, very good shape overall, because Alex Bowman would be the number 1 driver in any other organization. I think Hunter Motorsports is set up long term, and I think that this will be something that is become a non-issue at this point, and I think this has probably already been resolved at this point and isn't a major issue. So I understand what was going on there. I understand why there was a lot of talk about this. I think Chase Lee was in the wrong for running to Kyle Larson. But you know what? He took responsibility, and that's all that matters at this point. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sam Mayer. As it was officially confirmed yesterday that Sam Mayer will be returning to Junior Motorsports in 2024, driving the number 1 car. Sam Mayer has been driving for Junior Motorsports the last couple of years, and Sam Mayer has been having a career year with Junior Motorsports this year in 2023, being seated number 5 going into the playoffs, and also has already scored 2 wins this year in 2023, winning those races both at road courses, first at Road America, and then of course the other win coming a few weeks ago, Watkins Glen, after getting into the back of Ty Gibbs. Sam Mayer has definitely been improving this year in 2023, and while he's made a little bit of uncharacteristic mistakes, Sam Mayer has been having a very solid and great year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. In my opinion, this is well-deserved, and it also helps the fact that he does have some sponsorship funding from Accelerate QPS, which of course is owned by his father, Scott Mayer, who of course was a winner in IMSA at Road America. Look, I think this is a great decision for Junior Motorsports to bring Sam Mayer back. Because you all have to remember, people expect Sam Mayer to be going out there winning a lot of championships. Sam Mayer is only 20 years old right now. He's still a relatively young race car driver who is only going to get better over time. And I think as Sam Mayer next year going into 2023, I think he's going to win a lot, 24 I should say. I think he's going to end up winning quite a few races in 2024. I think the fact you're not going to have John Hernimacek there, I think as Sam Mayer will go out and win at least 3 to 4 races next year. And I think the goal for Sam Mayer, like I think is this year, is to make the Championship 4. Which, by the way, I think he's got a really great chance this year to make the Championship 4 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think he's going to have a great opportunity and chance to do that. And I think overall, you're going to see Sam Mayer continue to improve over time. He's getting better. I think he's going to have a good chance to win at Bristol. Look, he won the truck race back in 2020 or 2021 with the 75 team, for not mistaken, with GMS. I certainly think that Sam Mayer can go out there and win more races in the truck series in the future. In Xfinity, I should say. So I do believe that Sam Mayer is going to win more races in 2024, and I think he for sure will be a championship threat and a championship contender. So I expect Sam Mayer to get better, and I'm glad to see that he is going to be back with Junior Motorsports going into 2024. At least there's some stability. Now, the future of the other drivers of Junior Motorsports is to be determined. We kind of talk about the fact that Sammy Smith might be headed over there next year in 2024. There's been some crazy rumors circulating that Justin Allgaier may not be returning to that team this next year in 2024. Could be out of the Call It Racing Xfinity or Cup program next year. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, but it's good to see that Sam Mayer is coming back. I think this is a well-deserved that he's coming back to the team in 2024. I think long-term he'll be a Cup driver, but I think it's saying Xfinity, because remember, he's only 20 years old. He's got plenty of time. He's very young, and I think he will be there with the team and will continue doing great things with the organization in 2024. So I am very happy, nonetheless, to see that Sam Mayer is coming back to the organization in 2024. I think this is well-deserved. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about stage cautions at road courses. As it was announced yesterday and reported and said by Elton Sawyer on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio that stage break cautions are going to be returning at the Charlotte Roval. The reason they're bringing them back is because they want the same rules across the board throughout the whole entire playoffs. When I heard this yesterday, I was beyond pissed and really, really upset. And I am going to explain why, in my opinion, that this is overall not okay move. And I think this is a very, very bad move on all fronts in all aspects. Look, NASCAR early in the year, when they removed stage caution of road courses, I said that that was one of the best decisions NASCAR had made. They're bringing it back because they want the field to be a lot more competitive. And in my personal opinion, they were bringing it back because they want more chaos. They want the playoffs to be more chaotic than they've already been. I mean, there's already been enough chaos in the first 2 races. So why do you need more chaos in the playoffs? And look, stage caution road courses, in my opinion, is just overall not a very, very good move. And I will explain why. It ruins legitimate strategy. You get fake strategy, in my opinion, because you have to decide if you're going to go for the win or if you're going to be going for the stage points, which will screw everything up. I think the drivers that are up front deserve to get those stage points. Now you're going to be causing a lot more chaos. And one of the other reasons why I think this is a bad move is because the car itself you cannot pass with. Stage cautions and bringing it in is going to make the racing product worse on the road course, and you're going to have a lot of more stupid cats when you're going to have drivers dive bomb in the corner. Of course, Joey Logano is one of them that basically said this is a great move, but of course, Joey Logano is happy about that because he can't dive bomb 6 or 7 people like he did the Indy road course, and was one of the few people that could basically wreck people throughout the race because Joey Logano has kind of become not that good at road courses over the last few years, and obviously Team Penske has struggled at the road courses. I love the natural flow of races, and I love the fact that they did that where they had natural flow. Why does NASCAR have to make decisions like this? Because in my opinion, over the last few years, they have made a lot of great decisions. This is not one of them. And once again, NASCAR could not get their heads out of their butts and figure out the actual problem, which of course is the car itself. It is no secret that this has been a problem for the last few years where the road course racing with NASCAR hasn't been great. There have been good road course races, I will say. You go to tracks like, I don't know, I think basically the Indy road course is good. I thought the Chicago street course race is good, although there was rain tires in play for that. And then, of course, you get other races like COTA last year and this year, which I thought were going really well, of course, until the end of the race, where it kind of turned into a shit show near the end of the race. But the race played out naturally. Let these races play out naturally. And again, fix the problem with the car. Save more horsepower. Stop worrying about the racing. The racing itself is the problem, but fix the next-gen car. We have talked about this for 2 years now, where the car itself is the problem. If NASCAR could fix the actual problem, which is the car, they would be on the right track and the right way to go. I just don't understand why NASCAR cannot fix the problem, which is the car itself. And you have to resort to stupid Band-Aid fixes, removing underbody parts and stuff, which is basically this car is too good on road courses. It's a sports car. You can't pass with this car. It's impossible or really difficult to pass, which again, it shouldn't be easy to pass, but it shouldn't be nearly impossible to pass. I'm sorry, if a car is faster, they should be inevitably able to pass, and it shouldn't take forever to pass a race car, and you have to result in dive bombing a corner and moving them out of the way. We need this car fixed and give these guys more horsepower. We know that they said publicly, we know Doug Gates has said this, that they can get 100 extra horsepower. So why not? Let's get some extra horsepower to these cars so we can have better racing on the road courses and also the short tracks as well. The fact that NASCAR will not do that, I think, is really frustrating and really upsetting at this point. I don't understand why they won't do this. I think it's stupid. I think it's bonehead on NASCAR's part. And in my personal opinion, they need to go ahead and get rid of the stage cautions again. I hope it's just temporary. I hope this isn't permanent. And I really hope they find a way to get rid of them again in 2024. And just get, for the love of God, just fix the next-gen car and add horsepower to the car. Because in my opinion, the biggest thing that will fix this problem is adding more horsepower to the car. Because I know that they want to save money, but at this point, let's go ahead and add horsepower to these next-gen cars. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR silly season. Now, Bob Puck has put an article on FoxSports.com talking about 8 NASCAR Cup Series rides and some other little notes that were basically brought up in this article. He talked about all the rides that could be available. He does mention that Denny Hamlin, of course, signed that multi-year contract extension, and 2011 is going to be staying with Toyota, which means Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick are going to be staying in the Toyota camp. But he also mentions a lot of the other rides that still could be available. The first thing he mentions is that Ryan Preece and Eric Byrne are expected returning to their respective rides. Ryan Preece, of course, staying in the 41 car. He's close signing a contract extension with Stewart-Haas Racing. And Harrison Byrne, it's been reported the last week that an announcement is coming in the next few weeks. He'll be returning to the Wood Brothers in 2024. The next thing he mentions is that Eric Almirola is expected to announce something very, very soon in regards to his future with Stewart-Haas Racing. And also Smithfield is likely going to be, has not announced their extension, though it sounds very likely that Eric Almirola is going to retire at the end of the 2023 season. That Smithfield will likely be gone. He also mentions that Cole Custer could potentially be elevated to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2024 in the number 10 car. Obviously, Cole Custer currently drives their Xfinity Series program. He's been having a pretty solid year, scoring 2 victories, and I think he's got a really great chance and opportunity to make the championship 4 and win the championship this year. And I feel like the Cole Custer has been getting better and better as the year has progressed this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. So there's a really great chance and possibility that Cole Custer may get elevated to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2024, but also Zane Smith is in the running. But we'll talk about Zane Smith later in this episode. The next thing he mentions is about Ty Dillon and Daniel Hemmer. Obviously, been a lot of rumors and rumblings suggesting that Kaulig Racing is very close to announcing their 2024 plans. We had reported they're likely going to be announcing an announcement maybe later this week in regards to their Cup Series program for 2024. AJ Allmendinger, of course, it sounds we're not sure yet at this point if he's going to be returning to the Xfinity Series next year or seeing the Cup Series in 2024. But Ty Dillon is in the running for the 16 Cup car for Kaulig Racing in the 2024 season. And Daniel Hemrick is in the running also for Cup ride for 2024 as well with Kaulig Racing. Obviously, Daniel Hemrick is part of the Kaulig Racing family. He's been with the team for the last 2 years, currently driving a 10 car for them in Xfinity, and has been having a really good year in Xfinity as well, and does have some former Cup Series experience. Also ran last year in 2022. Ty Dillon, of course, sounds like there's a good chance he's out of Spire Motorsports at the end of this year, and Ty Dillon does bring a little bit of sponsorship funding with him as well. I just don't know how to feel about him taking over that car next year, because I don't think Ty Dillon's going to do a really, really good job. And it'll depend on, though, if AJ Allmendinger does decide to go ahead and return to Xfinity, or if he stays in Cup. Ty Dillon likely won't be in that car, might be in the 31, but there's also been a lot of talk and mention about other drivers for that 31 car. Matt DiBenedetto is a mention for the Kaulig Racing car. Obviously, Matt DiBenedetto, I think, is a very, very solid driver, and I think he would do a pretty good job with Kaulig Racing. Also, we don't know what's going on with Shane Van Gisbergen at the moment. We don't know if he'll be with Kaulig or with another team next year. Sounds like he's going to be going through a development deal. There's other drivers to mention there. Speaking of Spire Motorsports and Ty Dillon, so like I said, it sounds very likely that Ty Dillon will not return to Spire Motorsports in 2024. And according to Bob Pockrass, Carson Osbar is still the front runner to take over the number 77 car in the Cup Series in 2024. Carson Osbar has been making select NASCAR Cup Series starts here with Spire Motorsports and has been having a pretty good year with that team. Not in Spire Motorsports Legacy, I should say, and has been doing a pretty good job with Legacy in the few starts he's ran. And I think he's going to have a good chance maybe get a top 15 or top 20 this weekend with Legacy. And I think Carson is absolutely ready for a full-time Cup ride in the 2024 season. Next, let's talk about the Rick Ware number 51 car. He mentioned they have not made a decision in regards to if they're going to have one driver in that car or if they're going to have multiple drivers. Of course, it's been announced that Justin Haley will be joining Rick Ware Racing, but it sounds like he'll be in the 15 car instead of the 51 car. My guess is maybe this could be a potential possibility for a guy like Zane Smith. If Zane doesn't go to the team, we'll talk about later. There's also maybe potential that Riley Hurts gets an opportunity, and maybe even Haley Deegan, she gets an opportunity to make some select Cup starts in 2024. Then he mentions the Live Fast number 78 car. Obviously, Live Fast Motorsports, they have not announced their 2024 plans. There's a chance maybe we see Sheldon Creed get some starts at a team once again. Maybe Anthony Alfredo gets a chance and an opportunity to drive that car as well once again. And maybe BJ will drive that car once again. But speaking of Haley Deegan, he mentions that Haley Deegan also could get elevated in 2024. While she has struggled in the Truck Series, there's a lot of talk that she could get elevated to the Xfinity Series in 2024. I've heard some interesting teams that she could have an opportunity to drive for next year. He also mentions about Roger Carruth as well. Roger Carruth, obviously, there's a lot of talk about Spire running a full-time Truck Series team. Roger has driven for Spire before, and he's been linked to that number 7 truck next year for 2024. Grant Enfinger is also linked for a couple different teams as well for next year in 2024, so we'll see what happens there. But I think silly season is going to be very interesting over the next 2 weeks, because I think a lot of teams are going to announce their plans for 2024, but I think it's really cool that Bob Pockrass put out that article in regards to that, and I love that article that Bob Pockrass had put out in regards to silly season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next major story in today's episode, as we're talking about Noah Gragson. As it was officially announced yesterday that Noah Gragson has been reinstated by NASCAR and has basically now cleared to return to all NASCAR activity. And Noah Gragson is thankful for everything that he's done and is thankful that he is back into NASCAR and is hopeful to get a second chance once again into the sport. First of all, I am very, very happy that Noah Gragson has been reinstated back in the sport. Obviously, Noah Gragson had been suspended since the Michigan weekend for basically liking a meme on Instagram, and it was kind of controversial, and obviously got suspended first by Legacy Motor Club. Of course, it was announced about a week or two ago that he would not be returning to the team in 2024, and John Hermanchek will be taking over that ride in the 2024 season, which before that meme incident, it was very likely at this point that Noah Gragson was not going to be returning to Legacy Motor Club anyways for the 2024 season. But of course, he was suspended definitely by NASCAR and had completed the Road to Recovery program and had basically gone through the program that he needs to go through the sensitivity training and is cleared to come back to the sport. Again, I will say this. I do think that Noah Gragson, the team, if they want to suspend him, it was their decision. But I feel like personally that Noah Gragson maybe should not have been suspended by NASCAR indefinitely. I think that was a little bit harsh on NASCAR's part. I think he should have gone through the same process. I think she could have gone through the sensitivity training side of things and gone through that, but not been suspended indefinitely. I think that was a little bit over the top on NASCAR's end, and I think it was really, really frustrating that they suspended him indefinitely. So I think it was ridiculous that they did not bring him back as quick as they did. And I will say this about Noah Gragson too. Well, I think it was not the smart decision Noah Gragson had made. Because all these teams have contract clauses, Noah Gragson 1000% deserves a second chance. And I think Noah Gragson will get that second chance. But the big question now revolves around where will Noah Gragson end up in 2024? Well, let's speculate that here. I did a video talk about this yesterday where I kind of speculated on where Noah Gragson was going. And of course, that was before it was announced he'd been reinstated back into the sport. I think there's a lot of options for him. First, you have Kaulig Racing. There are a couple potential teams that Noah Gragson could end up going to for Kaulig Racing. You've got their Cup Series team and their Xfinity Series team. Obviously, the 31 car is available, and I talked about it just a few minutes ago, but Kaulig Racing is expected to make an announcement in regards to their Cup Series program for the 2024 season, and the 31 car is available. Now, Noah Gragson does have some sponsorship funding. It sounds like Black Rifle Coffee has left that team for 2024, so maybe Black Rifle Coffee can still work with Noah Gragson. He goes over there and drives the 31 car, which I think would be a solid upgrade for Noah Gragson, and he'd do good. But you've also got their Xfinity Series program that could be available as well and would not be a bad option for Noah Gragson. You've also got some other Xfinity options. Junior Motorsports. Noah Gragson has driven for Junior Motorsports in the past, drove for them for 3 or 4 years, almost won the championship with them in 2022, scoring 8 wins, and was this close to win the championship last year. And I think if he goes over to that 8 car, the 9 car, even the 7 car, I should say, Noah Gragson would easily be a championship threat or contender. But I think he's going to need sponsors and funding, but luckily he's got Black Rifle Coffee that is working with him. There's also some other options in the Xfinity Series. If Spire runs their Xfinity Series program, maybe he could go there. But there's a lot of options in the Truck Series that I think are going to be available for Noah Gragson next year. Rackley WR Racing team that I have heard is a potential possibility. Obviously, we know that Matt DiBenedetto is now returning the 25 truck for Rackley WR Racing for 2024. So I think that team could absolutely be available for him in 2024. And that team has been extremely competitive this year with Matt DiBenedetto. And I think that team is only going to get better if Noah Gragson inevitably ends up driving there and wouldn't need as many sponsors and funding if he was to drive that truck. You've also got Autosport Racing. This is another team that I've heard has been rumored for Noah Gragson. I've already talked about Haley Deegan, that she can moving up to Xfinity in 2024. And there's a chance that Noah Gragson may take over that truck in 2024 at Autosport. They're a competitive team. They don't get as much backing. But I think at that number, that truck could easily be available for Noah Gragson in the 2024 season. You've also got other teams that could be available, like Nice Motorsports. We've obviously talked about Carson Osborne. It sounds like he's going to be going Cup racing in the 2024 season. I would imagine that number 42 truck is going to be available, though Shea Van Gisbergen is in the running for that truck as well for the 2024 year with Trackhouse development deal and what they're working on with him for next year. But I think Noah Gragson will get a good ride next year, at least in trucks and Xfinity. I think going back to Cup is going to be really, really difficult for Noah Gragson in 2024 unless he goes to Kaulig Racing. But I think that Noah Gragson will for sure find a ride for 2024. Again, talking about Noah Gragson once again, I am very, very happy and glad to see that Noah Gragson is back in the sport. He shouldn't have been suspended by NASCAR, in my opinion. I think they maybe were a little bit over the top, and a death suspension was a little bit overkill, in my opinion. But it's good to see that NASCAR is letting him back in the sport, and I'm very glad to see that he is returning. Now, if you want my opinion, I think there's a great chance he ends at that 31 car at this point. I think that's the most likely option that is available for Noah Gragson because Kaulig Racing, like I said, has an announcement coming later this week, and we know for sure that they are waiting for a key piece. Noah Gragson being reinstated is that key piece. I'm thinking there's a good chance he has it at a 31 car, but I think there's a lot of potential options that are available for next year. So we'll see what happens in regards to Noah Gragson, where he ends up driving in the 2024 year. But I'm very, very happy and glad to see that Noah Gragson is coming back to NASCAR. Glad to see he's reinstated. He deserves a second chance, in my opinion. And very glad to see that NASCAR is giving him that second chance and opportunity. Now, Noah Gragson needs to do it. Because remember, Noah Gragson is still a very solid driver. He scored 8 wins last year in Xfinity, made the championship 4. You don't win 8 races to make the championship 4 if you're not a good driver. Noah's a good driver. I know he struggled with legacy, but I think that Noah Gragson is going to do good next year and will have a good ride for 2024. I think he'll be in a ride in 2024. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Zane Smith. Now, we've talked about Zane Smith quite a bit on this channel in regards to his future in NASCAR. And for the longest time, a lot of us have linked him to maybe taking over the 10 car for Stewart-Haas Racing in the 2024 season. Well, apparently there's another team that is in conversations for Zane Smith, and that is Trackhouse Racing. According to Bob Pocker's article, we talk about when it comes to silly season, Adam Stern actually talked about this as well. Zane Smith has reportedly talked to several Cup teams, including Trackhouse Racing, according to sources. But Trackhouse doesn't have a spot for him in 2024. So any deal with Trackhouse would likely be a situation where he is leased to another team. This is actually a very, very surprising move in my opinion, because if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure Zane Smith does have a contract with Ford that goes through the 2026 season. But I've also heard something that maybe they basically bought out the contract where him was supposed to be front row through 2026, and basically there's a chance he could still go back to the Truck Series program in 2026. But Zane Smith, the Trackhouse, would be a very, very interesting move. Now, like I just said a second ago, and it was mentioned in the article from Bob Pockers, is the fact that they do not have a ride available for him for 2024, at least on a full-time basis. Remember, Ross Chastain signed a long-term deal with Trackhouse Racing. While the details were not enclosed, Ross Chastain probably signed at least a 5-year extension with the team through like 2027 or 2028. His contract was expired at the end of 2023. Now we know for sure that Ross Chastain is staying long-term. And remember, Busch Beer is going to be working with Ross Chastain. And then, of course, you have Daniel Suarez, who signed a multi-year contract extension that at least goes through the 2025 season. So Daniel Suarez is sticking around long-term. And we know for a fact that while Trackhouse Racing does want to expand to 3 full-time cars for 2024, and they had tried to court Corey LaJoie over for 2023, they unfortunately did not have the money for the charters, and charters right now are going for $40 to $50 million. Zane Smith is being wanted by a lot of Cup teams currently at the moment. I think Trackhouse would be a very solid team for Zane Smith to go with. But like I already mentioned, there aren't a lot of rides available in the Trackhouse camp. And obviously there's another piece that's coming into play that could hurt this possibility. Shane Van Gisbergen. Shane Van Gisbergen, of course, is working on a long-term development deal with Trackhouse Racing, but right now, we have not heard any new updates in regards to that, and we're almost about a month and a half since that was supposed to be announced. And obviously, we now know for sure that we know who's going to be replacing Shane Van Gisbergen in Supercars, and he's working on a development deal where he'll probably drive for NASCAR Motorsports, Colorado Racing, of course, part-time at Trackhouse. But Zane Smith is in the running as one. I think that's another reason why I think this hasn't been announced for Shane, is because Zane Smith is in the running. I think Zane Smith is someone who could be a NASCAR Cup Series champion one day, and he almost came to Cup in 2022 with Chip Ganassi Racing. And while, like I said, I think there's a chance Zane Smith does return to front row's Truck Series program, I don't think he wants to stay in the trucks. We know for sure that Zane Smith 1,000% wants to move up to the NASCAR Cup Series in the 2024 season. He's made that public, and he's made that pretty clear. And I think Zane Smith is 1,000% ready to go to Cup. I mean, he got a top 10 with Front Row Motorsports this year in the Coke 600, which I think is extremely impressive. Yes, Front Row has improved this year, but I think he's done a great job with that team. Again, there's also a chance possibly that Zane Smith doesn't go to a team like Trackhouse Racing. There's also RFK. Some rumors have suggested that Stewart-Haas Racing could downsize maybe one of their cars in 2024, though we do know that they have a contract where they're supposed to have 4 cars. With Smithfield likely leaving, that 10 car may be gone, and we may see Zane Smith go to a team like RFK Racing, as RFK Racing does want to expand. And Brad Keselowski's been pretty high on Zane Smith, so we could see Zane maybe go to RFK in 2024 as well. Let's get back to the Trackhouse thing. So Zane was to go in, let's say, like the development program, kind of similar to Shane Van Gisbergen, maybe goes to Kaulig Racing, takes over to 16 car perhaps, which I think would be a really good move for Zane Smith. Kaulig is, like I said, a decent team overall, though I do mention that Ty Dillon's in the running for one of those rides next year in 2024. So that certainly is a possible option for next year. You've also got their Xfinity Series program, and remember, Zane Smith has actually driven for Kaulig Racing in the past. He drove for them in the 2024, 21 or 2022 season in substitution, I believe. I think it was for, I can't remember who it was. I think it was for Justin Haley, actually. Of course, leaving for Rico Racing at the end of this year. So he drove in substitution for them in 2020 or 2021. There's also some trucks rides that could be available for him. You've also got like Spire Motorsports perhaps, and there's other organizations that could be available. But I'm thinking more than likely still is likely that he's going to have SHR next year, but I think there's a lot of possibilities when it comes to Zane Smith. And I think Zane Smith, the Trackhouse, would be an absolute crazy and a massive bombshell move for the long terms. I think Zane would do a good job with Trackhouse Racing long term if he goes there. Because Zane Smith is getting a lot older as well. Remember, next year he'll be 25 years old. So Zane Smith is starting to get a little bit up there in age for the rookie stats, but you're starting to see a lot more rookies who are in their 30s now. You're seeing guys like Austin Hill long-term be a full-time rookie in the future. And then, of course, you have others like, of course, Shane Van Gisbergen will probably be a rookie in the Cup Series next year. And then, of course, you have Josh Berry, who is going to be 34 next year. And he's going to be considered older for a rookie. But back in the day, mid-30-year-old drivers were rookies in the NASCAR Cup Series. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Zane Smith. But him going to Trackhouse will be a very interesting bombshell move, I think, for this team. Do I think it happens? I think it is going to be very, very difficult to say. We obviously, like I said, know that a lot of NASCAR Cup Series teams really want a driver like Zane Smith to come into their team and work with them in a 2024 season. But again, there's not a lot of rides available. Obviously, the 21 car is going to be filled up. You're going to have Harrisonburg taking over that 21 car once again in 2024. We obviously know the call could be a great option for Zane, but I don't know if he'll go there unless he goes to that Trackhouse program. And then, of course, you have Trackhouse who wants to pick him up next year, 2024, which I think is going to be very, very difficult because Zane Smith is what everyone's looking at. He's probably pretty much right out of the center of the silly season, and wherever he ends up going could be a huge part in getting more of the silly season ball rolling. So we'll see what happens in regards to Zane Smith, but there is a good chance and a strong possibility that Zane Smith may be, in fact, driving for Trackhouse Racing in the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season. It's one thing we'll keep an eye on when it comes to the NASCAR silly season. So that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Where do you think Zane Smith ends up driving in 2024? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And where do you think Noah Gragson ends up driving in 2024? And how happy are you that he's been reinstated back into the sport? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, there's going to be 2 videos on the channel. We're going to have the NASCAR race picks for the Cup Series race at Bristol, the cutoff race side who gets to the round of 12. And then, of course, you're also going to have the Truck Series race review from Bristol as well. Then on Friday, we'll have the NASCAR Xfinity Series race review in Bristol, along with, of course, the NASCAR news video if any news breaks over the next couple days. And then, of course, on Saturday, there will likely be a special video dropping on the channel. Maybe like a 2025 driver lineup predictions could be dropping on this channel. And, of course, there will be a race review for Bristol. Then on Sunday, we'll have another video dropping on the channel. And there's a lot of great content dropping that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.